Secretary of State Rex Tillerson last week here on Fox News Sunday pushing for a diplomatic solution to our standoff with North Korea. Will today's apparent test of a hydrogen bomb change that policy? It's time now to bring in our Sunday group, the head of Heritage Action for America, Michael Needham, Marie Harf, a State Department official in the Obama administration, Jeff Mason, who covers the White House for Reuters, and former Republican Congressman Jason Chaffetz, who's now a Fox News contributor. Well, Congressman, let me start with you. Your reaction to what seems to be a dramatic escalation in North Korea's nuclear program. What they are saying is their first test of a hydrogen bomb.
It is an escalation, and we're going to have to ramp it up. And we've tried everything from sending in Dennis Rodman to boosting up the military presence. But I think a lot of focus has to go to Japan, on China. The secretary earlier in this program talked about new sanctions with anybody doing business with North Korea. Well, the main trading partner with North Korea is China, and it'll be very interesting to see how far this administration takes those types of sanctions. But China has the most vested interest in making that change there. But it's hard when more than $1 trillion of our United States debt is owned by the Chinese. That puts us in a very precarious position.
Yeah, Marie, I want to pick up on that with you as a veteran of the State Department. Your reaction to what has happened today in North Korea, and to be fair, your president and George W. Bush and Bill Clinton all tried, and they have all failed to stop North Korea from pursuing its nuclear ambitions.
That's right. And North Korea has shown that no amount of international isolation has dissuaded them from pursuing this program. So many administrations have tried. There are no perfect options. There aren't even really great ones. But two things I think are important. The president needs to be very clear that right now is not the time to renegotiate the South Korean trade agreement. Now is not the time to threaten them, because we need to stand shoulder to shoulder with them. We need to focus on the real threat here, which is North Korea. And to be fair, the South Korean trade agreement's a pretty good one. The president's tweet this morning about appeasement, when he basically said the South Korean government was wrong, that is breaking news already in Seoul this morning. We've already seen reaction out of there. This is the time to stand squarely with our allies, because as I've said, there are certainly no good military options. We have to make it clear to North Korea that if they do anything like attacking the U.S., that their regime will be destroyed. And I think the president has to walk a fine line in doing that.
And what do you think of the Secretary Mnuchin? And he had just gotten off the phone with President Trump, saying much tougher sanctions and much more targeted on China.
Absolutely. Sanctions have to be a key part of the strategy here, but they have to be combined with other things like making sure missile defense keeps getting better and better, making sure the South Koreans and the Japanese have what they need to defend themselves, and making clear to North Korea that this is not acceptable, and making sure the American people understand the real threat here. Not an escalatory rhetoric cycle that we've seen before, but being very clear-eyed about it.
Michael, I want to bring you into the conversation. A bunch of things here to talk about. The North Korean test, the word from Secretary Mnuchin, a new sanctions regime, and also this question of, is this the right time to possibly pull out of our free trade agreement with South Korea?
Yeah, we need a full sanctions and pressure regime. We need ballistic missile defense. We need secondary sanctions on China if they're not willing to participate. The types of sanctions that were in place on Iran previous to President Obama's unadvised Iranian deal were far tougher than anything North Korea has been under. So the president isn't accurate when he's saying that North Korea is more isolated than any other country ever has been. I do agree now's not the right time to pull out of the Korea free trade agreement. That's an important free trade agreement. It benefits farmers and ranchers across America. But the same is also true of South Korea. South Korea and President Moon has talked about restarting the Kaesong industrial complex. This was a joint South Korea-North Korea industrial complex that was started about 20 years ago. It was the expansion of it was stopped in 2006. After the nuclear test, it was pulled out of in 2016. I think if America and Korea are going to stand side by side, we should stay in our free trade agreement. But I think it would be a big disaster also for South Korea to reopen the Kaesong industrial complex.
Jeff, I want to a certain degree, this all feels like Groundhog Day to me, that the clock is waking up at, is ringing at 6 in the morning, and I'm hearing, I got you, babe, again. How many times have we seen it? There's a North Korean missile test or a nuclear test. We huff and puff. We talk about military options. We talk about sanctions. We talk about pressure in China. You've been covering the White House now for, what, 9 years? Everybody back to Bill Clinton has tried it. Never works.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, Bill Clinton actually, during his presidency, agreed on a package of giving $4 billion in energy aid to North Korea. That ended up not happening. President Obama asked his military to work together with South Korea to prepare for a potential attack. George W. Bush called North Korea the axis of evil, or part of the axis of evil. So you've heard rhetoric like this, you've heard words from presidents, and now, of course, you have President Trump really raising his rhetoric up in terms of talking about fire and fury. The question is, will any of that matter, and where is it going?
And what's the answer?
Well, the answer is we have to see what happens with North Korea and see what happens with China. President Trump has certainly worked very hard to build a relationship with President Xi of China, but he's shown increasing frustration with the fact that that relationship is not paying off. And, you know, as they're deciding whether or not to put more sanctions and economic pressure on China, as Secretary Mnuchin said, you have to also wonder if that's going to alienate a very key partner.
But I don't think sanctions would ever work. I don't think the president of North Korea cares about his people. He is only focused on obtaining nuclear
capability. So let me interrupt for a second, Congressman, because we've been talking around us. The one thing we really haven't discussed is a military option. Is there a realistic, credible military option?
I hope we never get to that point, but I do think the focus of the world has got to be with China, because North Korea's trading partner is China. And if China is not going to live up to the obligation to help what they did under the UN, I mean, I was very pleased with what Nikki Haley and the UN was able to achieve. But China has really got to be the focus here.
But the cost of even a perfect first military strike, the cost of that would be so appalling in terms of casualties, not just in South Korea and Japan, but possibly to American service members who are still serving over there. The cost of a military option would be astronomical, none of which I think we've thought through.
All right, we have to take a break here. But when we come back, the president is set to announce his decision for DACA this week. What will happen to the hundreds of thousands of dreamers in the U.S.? Plus, what would you like to ask the panel about President Trump's response to Harvey? Just go to Facebook or Twitter at Fox News Sunday, and we may use your question on the air.